talk a little bit about the Entity Framework Core when working with ASP.NET MVC Core. So first, this is a way to interact with permanent storage, for example, a database. Now, let's say we want to create a library application or a bookstore application where there's book information, users, whatever, right? Well, a database provides the ability to storage data permanently through tables. That's called persistence. Now, tables have attributes and are named after the entity they represent. For example, a table book, right, will have stuff about books. We'll have a book ID, like some identifier, a title, an author, a genre, a price, and who knows what else, right? For example, a table book with 4 rows might look like this. The first book is Harry Potter, this is the author, that's fantasy is the genre, that's the price. This is what a table might look like. Now, in a database, in a table in particular, you can do what's called CRUD operations. Create, read, update, and delete records. That's what you can do in a table. You can create new records, add new rows or new books, read and retrieve records, so get all the books that start with letter R, for example, or all the books that are under 1099, whatever, that's reading from the table. Update records, so let's change the price on one of the books. And delete records, let's get rid of one book. It's out of print or it's no longer needed. That's the CRUD operation. Now, sometimes you want to have several tables that interact with each other. Okay, and this goes into a database class, mostly for purposes of what's called normalization. But for this video, just be aware that you might have 2 entities. For example, one is book and the other one is the reviews about those books, right? And for example, you have a review that says, great book, another loved it, the movie is better, very informative. These are reviews. Now, these reviews have to be tied to some book. That's why next to the review text in the table review, we have the book ID. So then we can say, oh, book 25 has one review called Great Book that has the text Great Book. So book 25 is The Innovators, right, from Walter Isaacson. So here we have 2 reviews for book number 1, and book number 1 is Harry Potter. So that's how you know that the reviews are about this book. Why do you do it like this? Well, because it doesn't make sense to repeat the name Harry Potter or The Innovators or whatever very long title is there, because every character you type uses space and you want to optimize your space and optimize search. And each review has an ID, therefore you know which review came first, for example, right? You can have a review. Now, each review, for example, review 82, refers to one and only one review for Harry Potter. Review 23 refers to one and only one review for book ID 8, which is the code book. In here, the ID, the book ID, book 25, ID 25, refers only to this book, okay? ID 8 only refers to this book. Now, if you had the same book, for example, okay, but you have a different price because it's the golden edition or who knows why, right? It'll still have a different ID. Each ID is associated to only one row. Whereas if you have the same book in different editions, the title might be associated to more than one row because you have the same title several times. IDs don't repeat, right? Now, these IDs, these attributes, these columns that don't repeat are called usually primary keys. And then foreign keys is a column. A foreign key is a column that is actually a primary key someplace else. That will be a foreign key that we use to tie one table to another, like book ID. So that's what you need to know about databases in order to start using the Entity Framework Core. So let's get to it. We'll have the Entity Framework Core is an object relational mapping framework, and that means it can map objects to entities, right? So we can code these tables as if they were C# objects. So we don't have to deal with the intricacies of how you code the table or database language nor anything like that. Now, the Entity Framework Core supports many database engines, and it can look at the database and create model classes. So you can have a database already, and the Entity Framework Core can create the model classes for you. Or the opposite, which is what we're going to do. We can create a model and have the Entity Framework Core generate the database for us. So let's start a new project. So we're going to go File, New Project, and this is going to be MVC Core Project. So I go to Web, ASP Core. I'm going to call it Bookstore 2 because I already had other bookstores. And that's going to be a MVC project. So I'll just say OK. And now I have my my skeleton of a model view controller website. So the first thing that I'm going to do, well, we're going to run this just so you know what's going on here. This is a regular, ASP.NET Core. It comes pre-populated. And here we have our project, which is the standard that comes with ASP, with a home, about, contact links. And if you click on some of these are just placeholders, like the about link, for example, that only says, your application description page here. Contact is just a similar, placeholder web page. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, first for a bookstore, we're going to have a book model. Let me stop this. We're going to have a book model. To do that, we're going to go to models here, models here, and we're going to right click, add, and then just a simple class. If class is not available here, go to new item and pick a C# class, empty class. So the book model will look like this. Empty class. We're going to call it book.cs. And here in my book class, I'm going to create a couple of things. So for example, public int ID, getter and setter, of course, public string title, getter and setter, public datetime, release date, for example, getter and setter, public string author, author, also getter and setter. They will all have getters and setters, so they will be public. That's part of having this this model class. I'm going to have genre just to mimic the table. And then I'm going to have the price, getter and setter. So this is going to be my book class. So I save it. Now, the next thing I want to do is to create a controller. Now, my controller will have database functions for this and a couple of other things. So I'm going to create a controller here like so. The controller, what it's going to do is going to scaffold the project so that I have database capabilities, and we'll see how. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to controllers here, right click, add, and then a controller. Now, the first time I create a controller, I'm going to get this dialog. The second time, and the controller won't be created. The second time, I'm going to go in again, and the controller will be created. I'm going to click on Minimal Dependencies and say Add. Okay. So once the controller is created, once the scaffolding happens, this what just happened was a scaffolding. There's like a whole list. There's a whole text file that teaches you a lot about this, how to use some of the scaffolding properties, but we will need this for this video. Now, I have not added my controller yet, so I'm going to go at it again, and the second time I will say add controller, and then a dialog comes up like this one, right? What I'm going to do is first I'm going to create an MVC controller with views using entity framework. This one, MVC controller with views using entity framework. This will create a lot of functionality for me ready off the bat. I need to specify for this the model class. What's going to be my model? It's going to be my book. Okay, that's going to be my model. Now, in the data context class here, I'm going to click on the plus sign. And here, this is what's proposed. I'm going to just add that. Perfect. And then here, I'm going to click on all these things, generate views, reference, use it, and then use a layout page. I can use the typical layout. That's going to be here in views, shared, layout, typical layout page. And then the controller name will have books controller. Okay? All right, so then I'm going to click on add. All right, so what we can see, is that Visual Studio created an entity framework context class under the data directory. See this data folder here? That's my context class. We can open it, but it's not going to help much now. It also created views. If you go to the views for books, it created views for create, delete, edit, index, details, right? It created a bunch of views here for me. That are views that control the database. You can look at them in more detail to like even increase your control over database. Now here's the thing. It is ready to work, but it's missing a database from the model. There's no database from the model. So what I'm going to do though is to do what's called a migration. Okay, an initial migration I need to do using the package manager console and installing some of the packages and update the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, yes, where is this? NuGet Package Manager, and then open the Package Manager console. So once the console is open, first I'm going to install package. I issue this command, install package, and then Microsoft Entity Framework core.tools. So I'll install this package. Then I'm going to issue the command add migration, initial. The capital and lower case matters in letters. And then I can put here the word context and then the name of my context. In my case, it's bookstore 2 context. It's highlighted here, right? That's the name of my context. So this context here is optional. Okay, you can specify or not. Then the last command I need to issue here is update database. And these three commands are going to create a database. Oops, so I issued the wrong command. So I'm going to issue it again. Is update database. Okay, I had a syntax error right there. databc, database, go. SQL Server Object Explorer right there. And we can see that we have our SQL Server Explorer right here. Let's refresh, and let's see if we see our table. Going to local server, databases, and I have a bunch of other databases that I created, but here's the bookstore context database. And if we go here, we can browse the tables, And here's the table book, right? And we can right click and say view data, which has nothing in it right now. And it shows me the table. There's nothing there. This null row is just means there's nothing there. But it's a table with an ID, author, genre, release date, title, and price. So let's actually look at our application running, because believe it or not, we have a full-blown application here. Now we have our website, our regular website, but we're going to go to our books controller. So books. This takes us to the index page of books, which is a list of all the books we have. But we can always go to create new. It's the same thing as if we put books/create. So let's go create a new book. So now we're in the create page and we can create a book. So for example, we can create Harry Potter, the release date, and we can, here because it's a default date, I'll have to create the date and the time. Usually you can control what part of the date time object you want to create there, just the date or just the time, or both. So it's going to be created at 8:54 p.m. It's going to be the time. And the date is going to be November 28th of 2017. Sure, why not? The author is going to be J.K. Rowling. And genre is going to be fantasy. And the price is going to be $9.99. And then I create. I'm going to create another book as well. So here it goes back to the index with Harry Potter, and I can edit this, which will take me to the edit page. I can look at the details, right, which will take me to the details view, and I can delete this book as well. I can create another book. So A-Man in the High Castle. The release date is going to be October 28th, sure. And the time is going to be 8:54. The author is going to be Walter Isaacson. Oh, no, Man in the High Castle. I'm wrong author. The author is going to be Philip P. Dick. And then the genre is going to be fantasy as well. And the price will be, I don't know, $24.99. And then I'll create it. Now, I'll have two books and they both show up in the list. I can edit my books. I can edit one and then it'll take me to the same screen, but I can change stuff, right? So, and I can go back to the list. Oops. I can back to list. So for example, I can edit A Man in the High Castle and there you go. That's the author, right? Save it and it'll be reflected on the list. See, Philip PD. I can look at details, which will just give me a details page. I cannot do anything with that. And then I could delete the book, right? So for example, I'll delete this book. And then it asks me, are you sure you want to delete this book? And then I can say delete, in which case the book is going to be removed from the list. Now all these changes have been persisting in my database. So if I go back to my project and I go to my SQL Explorer, I go back to my SQL Explorer, I can see here's the table book that I had earlier. I can view the data. And you'll see that I have Harry Potter only because I deleted the other one. I would have as many books as I enter. And this is how you can keep permanent storage. In future videos, we'll see how to manipulate this data better, how to do stuff with this data as well. Thanks.